There are a few countries that have a troubled history with the IMF. One is Argentina. Their relationship didn't have a positive outcome, and yet President Mauricio Macri has decided to return to the fund.
The problem we have is that we are one of the countries that depends most on external financing, a product of huge public spending that we have inherited and that we are dealing with. Given this new situation, and as a preventative measure, I have decided to start conversations with the International Monetary Fund so that they grant us a line of financial support.
President Macri made the announcement after a string of interest rate hikes failed to stop a plummeting peso. Last week, the peso hit an all-time low of 23.5 against the US dollar. The central bank then raised its key interest rate for a third time in 10 days to 40%. Latin America's third largest economy is also struggling with double-digit inflation, which hit 24.8% last year. The IMF projects Argentina's external debt will reach $253 billion this year. Argentina is expected to ask for at least $30 billion. Economy Minister Nicolas Duhovne believes it's the best option for growth.
It's the cheapest financing that's available to us. The fund is loaning at rates that are lower than those in the market. The international rates have gone up. This doesn't increase Argentina's debt because it simply replaces a different form of financing that is more expensive.
But many Argentinians don't agree. They blame IMF-backed policies for an economic meltdown in 2001. Policies that pushed millions of middle-class Argentinians into poverty, 1 in every 5th into joblessness, and led to banks freezing deposits. The peso lost nearly 70% of its value, and within just 2 weeks, the country had 5 successive presidents.
We are here after going through a decade during which inflation has been about 1,700%, so people are full of distrust.
The government says the IMF today is different from the one 20 years ago, and so is Argentina. But while the country is economically stronger than in the run-up to the 2001 crisis, it will have to work harder to convince many Argentinians that history won't be repeated. Usman Lone, TRT World.
Let's get more on this now with Remi Piet in Miami. He's Senior Director of market research firm America's Market Intelligence. Remi, great to have you on the show, as always. How much of what Argentina is facing right now due to peso weakness, due to weaknesses in its own economy, and how much of it is due to the dollar's strength against almost everything else, really?
Well, you do have a strengthening of the US dollar against different economies around the world, obviously, but the level to which the peso has decreased in value is not comparable to other currencies such as the euro or other developing nations' currency. Since January 1st, you had the peso decreasing by 17%, which is harder and stronger than for other currency, which shows that there's a distrust from investors into the current reforms and the capacity of the Argentinian economy to sustain growth in the long run.
That is interesting. So what is different then about what's happening to Argentina now and what happened in 2001?
Well, there's a series of differences. I mean, first of all, in 2001, there was two different dynamics that led to the crisis. First, the strengthening of the US dollar but also the depreciation of the Brazilian reals, that preventing Argentinian economy to continue exporting to its Brazilian neighbor. At this moment right now, we don't have this evolution of neighboring currencies that would deepen the crisis for Argentina. More importantly, that we've started to see already some reforms from Macri. He has passed an ambitious pension reform a few months ago. So you do have a series of reform of the Argentinian economy that should give it the capacity to answer a further crisis down the road.
And as we've seen, the Brazilian real has been depreciating recently as well. Is going to the IMF the right thing to do at this stage for Argentina? What is the IMF asking for in return?
Well, there was depreciation of the real, but not to the level that it was the case in 17 years ago. But in the case of what the IMF will be asking, it's a continuance of the reform. Right now, it's important to point out the fact that we're not talking about a loan. We're talking about a credit line, which is a tool of to a level of $30 billion, a tool that will allow the country to show the investors that it has the backing of the IMF. Other countries have done the same in the past. Poland, Colombia, Mexico. Poland is actually outside of this mechanism, but the objective here is to reassure investors, reassure market that the IMF has the back of Argentina, and that they should continue trusting the President Macri to reform the country. Those reforms include furthering of the pension reforms, but also a series of deregulation of different markets for investors, but also the capacity of large companies to invest in terms of natural resources, infrastructure, for example, but also, let's say, deregulation of the labor market, which will be important to see in Argentina in the coming weeks.
In response to this depreciation, Argentina has been raising interest rates quite aggressively, very aggressively. In fact, you've got rates at 40% now. How is that going to affect ordinary people?
Well, this is the third increase of interest rates since the beginning of the year, now from 32% to 40%. It does create some impact on ordinary people because it can increase the recession or decrease the capacity of the Argentinian economy to develop down the road. We're looking at 2% growth now, and which is not enough for the country to create enough employment. Therefore, it's essential for Argentina to bring foreign investors to develop potentially public-private partnership in infrastructure, to provide interest from investors in the energy field, the mining sector. Therefore, those will create the jobs in the mercantile economy that Argentina needs. Okay. Because by itself, right, with such a high level of interest rate, it will not be able to create small companies from the population.
Okay, we're going to have to leave it there. Remi Piet, America's Market Intelligence. Thank you so much.